Hello, I'm Robin Milne, and I'm a polymer clay artist. I've been working with polymer for about 10 years. Before that, I have an art degree, but I've done a lot of display design, model making, computer graphics, that kind of thing. But when I found polymer clay, I found that I could do a lot of the things I was interested in doing three-dimensionally, and it's capable of doing all kinds of techniques. So it's really like one art form that you can keep learning, and it can mimic different things, it can do all kinds of things. So I have a handout, which I'll give at the end so that you're not distracted by that, and that you can take home, and it'll just give you the basics of polymer clay. There are different brands on the market. I like Primo, and I explain that in the handout, but it's very strong once it's baked. So I have samples here, and the reason I decided to do this drive-by is because I've come to the ITP shows many times, and I felt that I hadn't seen polymer clay used, and I think it has a lot of uses and applications, both art-wise and industrial design-wise, and I think that you could get a lot of use out of it. So this is at a number 1, which is the thickest setting on my pasta machine. So by cranking the clay through the pasta machine, you can condition it, but you can also make sheets of a uniform thickness. So this is on a number 1, and it has flexibility. You can eventually break it, but it's pretty flexible. This is 2 number 1s, and then you're kind of you still have flexibility where it's a durable piece of, you can build something, but it's not going to snap, it's not so brittle. So, so this is 2 number 1 thicknesses, this is a number 1, a number 3 on my machine, and a number 5. So you can get paper thin, and this is the translucent clay with a little bit of blue in it, just swirled in, on a number 5, and it's baked at a temperature of 275 degrees in a regular oven, so you don't need like a kiln for this type of clay. But I thought with the type of lights that I've seen at the show, a lot of interesting things could be made with the translucent clay. This is just a little more blue in it than this one. So these are just some samples here. And this clay can be cut with cookie cutters. Once it's baked, you could cut this with like scrapbooking decorative scissors. You could punch it with the paper punches. There's lots of different things, but it's very flexible, and you can get it very thin. So.
How'd you get maybe.
Yes, please.
How'd you get the layers, like the?
I literally took a ball of translucent clay and a thin line of blue clay and twisted, flattened it out, and put it through the pasta machine to get this.
And then you bake it.
Yeah, so I put it down on a ceramic tile, try to get the air bubbles out, and then I baked it.
And the baking doesn't change anything?
No, as a matter of fact, it bakes for 20 minutes for 1/4 inch of thickness. So something like this, you could probably bake for 10 minutes and be done. But it's more important to make sure things are cured properly in order for them to be strong. Otherwise, certain things might snap, or if you wanted to make a bookmark and it's more brittle when you play with it, it could snap. So bigger, thicker things. This is a pretty thick piece compared to this. I would bake it for about an hour. Lighter clays can discolor in the oven, and it helps to put a tint of aluminum foil over it to keep the lighter colors from changing in the oven. There's another clay called Ultralight that they also sell now that comes in a few colors, but this is more like a foam feel to it. And again, this is a very thin sheet and can be cut. This is a number 1, a thicker sheet, but it's exceptionally light. And if you want to pass these things around, I have samples of these, and you can see what this stuff feels like when it's baked. Here, I'll put one this way.
How strong is it? Is it very strong?
Well, you can feel this and see what you think. It depends on your application. That's the ultralight clay, and that's good for inside of things. It can be used for the project itself, depending on what you want to do with it. With the translucent clays, I add embossing powders, and you can make things that look like, river rocks, and I stamp words into them, and these can be made into beads. But again, for your project applications, you would have to decide what you would need for what. But embossing powders kind of bloom in the oven from the heat. So they might start out looking just like the translucent clay starts out just looking like this, and they might look perfectly normal, and in the oven it changes color to look however the embossing powder looks. There's also clays that have mica in them. The mica particles are like little mirrored particles, and when you run the clay through the pasta machine repeatedly, you fold it, run it through, fold it, run it through in the same direction, you're going to get a very shiny surface of the clay. I have some gold here. So this is one of the clays with mica in it. So right now you can see all kinds of streaks, but as you fold it and roll it through,
Didn't add the mica to it, it came with it.
these come with mica. There's silver, gold, bronze, red pearl, green pearl, blue pearl, and pearl.
Is this literally a pasta machine?
Yes. They do make, there's a couple of brands out now with clay rollers, but I mean, a quality pasta machine is fine. And there's different thicknesses. So as you can see now, the clay is really shiny. All the mica particles are lined up. So I'm going to cut this in half, and I'm going to stack it just to have some thickness. And then this is a rubber stamp, not too detailed, it's got some depth to it. All right, I'm going to press this design in. So now the surface has texture, but the design, the ridges in the stamp have altered the directions of the mica, and now I can take the blade and I can cut off the surface, okay? And I've already done it here, but I'll do it again. And what you end up with is like a hologram of the design. So if you gently touch the surface, you can see the design is gone, but you can still see it. And that's how the necklace I'm wearing is created, and how this piece is created. It helps to go a little more slowly than I'm going here, but
How deep do you go?
if you go too deep, you kind of lose it. It gets softer. So, I mean, but it's clay. I could always mush it back up, put it through the pasta machine, realign the mica, and start over. So you end up with a hologram. And there's a lot of cool effects you can do with that.
What's mica?
It's a type of rock. I don't know what kind of mica is actually used in the clay, but it's basically like little mirrored metallic particles. And by
A lot in New York State, like you see like the layers of it, and it's all, you see it a lot here, I think, around this.
right, it's like little mirrored particles that are in sheets. So when you align them in the clay, and then you're disturbing them with the rubber stamp, you still have the image even after you cut off the surface. So that's, just another cool effect you can do with the clay. The clay can be used to create texture plates. So this was just some scrap clay that was, a mud color. I conditioned it with the pasta machine, and then I literally took a leaf from outside, put it on the clay, ran it through the pasta machine, peeled it off, and baked this. And now I can take clay, put it on here. I use a spritz of water as a release, but I can press it on, peel it off, and then you can, recreate the leaf. So you can make your own texture plates. You can sculpt with the clay. I've made little bat pendants, rubber stamps, and then there's mica powders that you can put on the surface of the clay to bring out the design. This clay, you can bake it multiple times. So if you've created something and it's too big, you can sand it down, you can reshape it, you can add pieces to it, you can build it in parts. There is a liquid clay that you can use to add pieces that helps to, bond cooked clay to raw clay. So, there's always, it's never finished. You can always add things to it. You can drill it, you can carve it. There are people who have even turned it on the lathe like wood. So it's really just an incredible material. One of the most fascinating things people do is millefiori, like the glass artists do. So they would take rods of different colored glass and then build together a design and then melt it and cut pieces. And you're probably familiar with that. And like slice and bake cookies, the design goes through the whole log. So every time you slice it, you get that design. So things like this is from a cane that I built. And the design would have gone through the whole log, and every slice would have this flower. What else do I have here? This is a pumpkin, and this whole thing was built out of clay. And once you build it, you can actually build something large, so you can put a lot of detail into it, and then you can squeeze it down and reduce it, and the design stays there. So you can reduce it down and stretch it out and end up with a thin, a tiny design that you can use as an element for something, and every slice is going to have that design. And you can cut it thick or thin. All the flowers in this pendant were canes that I then sliced very thin and layered onto a pendant I had already created to make a veneer that I put onto the piece.
Can you pass around the translucent one also?
This?
Yeah. Thank you.
So I can demonstrate building a cane. This little bowl, and there are people who make great big bowls, is made using basic canes. So it's all pieces of designs that were built and then sliced and then applied to a small bowl, baked, and then the whole thing is removed as one piece. So you can build it however big you want.
So you have their form, and then you place each one accordingly?
Right. Right, so
And then
I would place them and make sure they're touching and attached to one another, and then bake it, and then the whole thing literally pops off when I'm done and stays together.
You have to apply something to the surface of it? It just
No.
pops off?
I kind of run a little, like a toothpick around, kind of break the suction.
Okay.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, it ends up very shiny, because when you bake against metal or glass or a ceramic tile, the surface ends up shiny. So the whole inside of the bowl is shiny, you'll see the outside of the bowl is matte, and that's the natural look of the clay. But if you look at a piece like this was sanded and buffed. And again, there's no varnish added to this. Some people do add varnishes to their clay. I think it looks unnatural, but you can do that, especially if it's a piece that was sculpted that you can't really sand and polish. But this is sanded with wet dry sandpaper, using 400 grit up to maybe 1200 grit, with a little water, and then buffed with a buffing wheel, like a muslin wheel, and you can get like a really glass-like shine with plastic. So let's see, is there anything else here I wanted to show
Can you
you?
explain how you compress a design?
I'm going to build a cane right now, because I think I've shown you pretty much the other stuff I wanted to show you. So this is a what's called a Skinner blend, where I took blue and white and created a blend. I'm going to do another one right now, and then I'm going to take those two and build a flower. All right. So that one's finished, and
Did we see this bowl?
the bowl. So, tables on wheels.
The quantities of these things, how much can you get it? And I'm wondering because can you make modular things that are like panels for an architectural surface?
You can,
Or-
I mean, you can really build anything you want, but the clay is sold in a 1 pound block like this, or 2 ounce blocks like this. I mean, on a sale, maybe $1 a block, so 50 cents an ounce. So figure, you know, is it good for large applications? Not necessarily, depends on your budget. So the reason we condition the clay is some of the clays are harder than others when they come out of the package, and they might crack when you bend them like this. This gets all the plasticizers redistributed in the clay so that it's strong when it's baked, and it also gets it moving and, you know, softer to work with. So this is done. I'm going to take some white, and then I'll show you how to blend these two. So I'm running it through the pasta machine and I'm folding it each time so I have a double thickness so that when it goes through, it's combining that double thickness. But I always put the fold in first so that if there's any air trapped, it escapes up instead of getting trapped in the clay. All right, so I'm going to fold these into 2 right angles. And I put them together like this. Now, in order to have some solid purple, I'm going to move this white over a little bit so that when it blends, I have some solid purple here, and when it blends, I have some solid white here. And I'm just going to pinch these together so they stay. So now they're already a double thickness, and I'm going to put it through at a number 1, which is the thickest setting. Stay together in a minute. Now, the trick here is to never turn it. You have to always put it back in the way it came out. 2 colors always have to touch the roller. The minute I turn it and put only purple in or only white in, you're just going to blend purple and white into like a lavender color. Start to see after maybe 10 passes, you'll see the blend. So it's coming, but it's not there yet. So I could keep going and you know, make this a smoother blend like this one, but for the flower it really doesn't matter. All right, so I'm going to fold this in half, and now I'm going to run it through this way to make it longer. Okay, so I'm not blending colors now, I'm just lengthening the strip. And now I'm going to thin it out, so I'm going to go to a number 3, which is thinner. What?
Do I need to be up there to hold it?
I was just going to say, you want to come back? Because it's sticky. My assistant. So I'm going to a number 5 now, which is pretty much the thinnest I would do on this particular machine. If I hit 6, this machine eats it. So now I have a blend. And I'm going to do the same thing with the blue and white, but to get this out of the way, I'm going to roll it up. This is a nice little trick. Rather than try to pinch this and not get air in the middle, I cut off an end. I'm going to roll this up. It's the same color, but I'm going to make a little snake, put it there, and now I have something to roll it against. Really makes it much easier. And this is called a Skinner blend roll. So when I cut the end, I'm using the wrong side of the blade, that's the problem. All right, so now you can see the rolled blend, and this is now officially a cane. The design goes all the way through. Any slice I take is going to be a blend with white in the middle and purple on the outside, all the way through from end to end. And you can cut thin slices, or you can cut thin slices or thick slices, depending on what you need it for. So I'm going to cut the ends off, so I have a clean log of this design. And I'm going to do it to the blue now.
Do they dry out at all, or is it?
No, it's not an air dry clay. So the only way it would go bad is if you leave it out and it gets dirty, or if you leave it in the sun or in the car or something and it gets heated up and it cures. But otherwise, no, it's perfectly fine, you know, for many, many years. So going back to one. And then I'm going to go 3.
How did you glue these together?
Excuse me?
How did you glue this?
They're not glued together.
They're
The cane slices on the bowl were just touching enough to stick to each other.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. Now this blade I'm using, they sell blades where they sell the clay, and you know there's stiff blades and flexible blades. This is a flexible blade, but I like the blade sharper than they sell at the art stores. So these actually come from like medical tissue supply, for like their tissue blades for biopsies and whatnot, and they're very good for cutting the clay very thin. You wouldn't need it, you know, for most applications. The ones at, you know, the craft store would work just fine. This is messed up over here, so I'm going to take it out. Okay, so now we have a second cane, and it's blue to white.
And how heat resistant is it?
Well, it cures at 275.
And then after, if you put hot water, it won't melt it, or if you had a light behind it?
They say, I mean, I've seen people make little votives and put a tea light in, and nothing really happens to it. I mean, should it be next to an open flame? I don't know, but I don't really see that, you know, it does any, you know, causes any problems. So now we have these two designs, and they're about the same size. So now what I'm going to do to create the flower, and where are the flower pendants? Anybody? There was a purple one floating around. Oh, here. So I'm going to create one petal. All the petals are the same. It's silly to build them all individually. I make one. Then I reduce it down, cut it into 5 or 6, and put it around a center. So for this particular flower, I'm going to cut down and cut this design into quarters. So now I've got that. I'm going to do the same thing with this one. So I've got those. I'm going to put these next to each other, and I'm going to put these in between. And this one I get to save for another project. So now I'm going to combine these and compress them. I mean, it's pretty soft right now. I've been working with it a lot, and it's warm in here. So it's pretty easy, and this is reducing. Ends always get messed up, so you got to keep that in mind as far as usable clay. But there's no clay you throw out, because, I mean, that can be used for something else. It can be combined into one color. Even if it's made into mud, I can use it for a plate. I've used, mud to make the bats. I've used mud to make magic wands. You don't never throwing out raw clay. So this is reduced, and I'm going to cut it and put it back together. This will make the design look more complicated. Let's see what it looks like. So that's what my flower petal is going to look like. And I'm going to wrap it in black, and then I'm going to reduce it before I go any further. I'm going to wrap it up. Give it definition from petal to petal. And these are also leaves that are rolled up to be beads on the same necklace maybe. All right, so this is wrapped. Now I'm going to reduce it long enough to have 5 petals for my flower, and I'd want them about 2 inches long. You can make your flower however you want. It can have as many petals as you want. It can have whatever center you want. So. So my cutting mat has a guide on here, so I'm gonna cut 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is what one petal looks like right now. Now I can line them up. I'm going to use the magenta for the center, and I could make the center a whole nother cane with a whole nother design. But right now we're just going to put it together to see what it looks like. See, at this point I can pinch these into a flower petal shape. They can be round, they can be pointed. And by putting them together, I can see what size the center of the flower needs to be. So I'm going to shape them. I'm going to pinch the centers, and I'm going to pinch the outside. When you put these together, you have to look at both sides and make sure that the centers are lining up, because they can twist. And now that I've pinched the centers, I need a smaller middle for the flower. Now at this point, this flower is built, but I can't reduce it now because it's an irregular shape. There's ways to get around that that have been created to reduce it, or you can fill it in with the translucent clay so that when you're cutting it, if you're cutting it thin, the translucent kind of disappears once it's baked. So if you're cutting it thin enough, then it goes away. If you're going to be cutting thick slices, you could either just use the flower at this size, or you can fill it with a background color that you like, for whatever it's going on. If you're going to put it on a white background, you could, fill it with white so that it just looks like it's a white flower. I would have to, let me cut this off.
By reducing, you mean making it smaller?
Right. Right, so right now this flower is built and this is the size it is, okay? If I wanted to make the flower smaller, I would need to reduce this cane. But if I tried to reduce this right now, I would squish it. The petals wouldn't stay the right shape. So you could take the translucent clay and condition it and make it into the shape that fits in to this notch all the way around. You would fill it, fill it, fill it, fill it so that it's round. Then you can squeeze the log down and reduce it and be able to slice it. And if you're slicing it thin for, the pendant that has the flowers on it, once you're slicing it that thin, the translucent disappears. But if you're slicing it thick, like something like this, I just used it the size I built it. Or there's ways to, there's new techniques where you can fill it and reduce it and take the packing out, but it's more complicated. So, it's a little rush, but this is the end of the cane, so it's only got one good side, but that's the flower I just created.
That's amazing.
You know, so you can make very detailed designs, but you're just building them larger and then reducing them. But everything is built vertically so that the color, every color goes straight through. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to show you. Oh, the other thing, I do some sculpting for a company that does chocolate and soap molds. So they asked for a baby sneaker for a baby shower. So I created one, and before I send it to them, I like to use like a 2-part silicone to make my own mold. That way, if it gets lost in the mail, if they break it, I can always make more. So what they do is they molded it at their end, duplicated it, so there were 2 baby sneakers, and now you can buy that sheet and make lollipops for a baby shower. So this is a molding material that, you know, is 2 parts of putty that you mix together, and it sets up, depends on the brand, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 2 hours, depends on what brand you buy. And some of them are food grade, so you could make a mold and then pour chocolate or whatever into it, and some of them aren't. But Marine Supply has this, and a lot of the craft and hobby stores have it.
But the sneaker is polymer.
The sneaker is polymer. But now I can create as many as I want.
This is just a stamp.
This was created by, I took a rubber stamp and I packed the recesses with clay. So once I pushed clay into it, like this, I mean, figure you push it into the whole thing, you're then taking a blade and cutting it off the surface. That worked pretty well, actually. Okay, so you can see now that you can see the parts that are sticking out. So now I would take some background. I have some clay. Do I have any white or no? And by putting it on here, sticking a little bit. Maybe too thin. But anyway, you can then pull out the design that, you know, where the red was in and the white is the background. And that's how I did that. So I just used too thin a background for it to work right now. Any other questions?
Yeah, where do you learn your techniques?
There's a lot of YouTube videos, there's a lot of tutorials online, but I really started, you know, getting artist quality work when I started taking master classes. There's guilds, polymer clay guilds in every state, and there are artists that travel around and teach all different techniques, and yeah. But pretty much playing with the clay and trying different things. When I first started, I mean, I had everything I needed. I read a lot. I did some things, but you know, I was so afraid of wasting the clay and not making good stuff. When I started teaching kids, it made a big difference, because things that I had never tried before, because I didn't know if I could do them, I would be like, here, let me show you something, and I could demonstrate it with the kids, and it always worked to their satisfaction. So it was, you know, a really good learning experience, because, you know, it kind of threw caution to the wind and created things. That piece you're holding is what we call makumagane, which it's based on the makumagane metal technique, where they put layers, thin layers of metal, and then disturb the layers. So we do thin sheets of clay. So there's maybe 16 layers of different colors of clay, and then you literally impress it with different tools, different stamps, and then again cut off the surface, and you get those lines from disturbing the layers of clay.
That's
Is
amazing.
also cane technique here somehow? Or?
That's not considered a cane technique.
Is it good for building like more three-dimensional things, like a character?
A lot of people do sculpting. You know, I didn't bring any big things. You know, I've made little things with it. I've made you know, I've done a lot of magic wands. The kids like those, and I've been trying to copy some of like the Harry Potter magic wands and things like that. But yeah, it's great for sculpting.
And for animation?
For animation, they usually use more like plasticine, which never dries. There's no reason you couldn't use polymer clay. I think it's maybe just a little more expensive than plasticine is. But yeah, with a bigger figure, maybe you would put an armature inside. You wouldn't make it solid clay. You would use a wire armature or a foil armature inside, and then you can build the figure over that.
If you layer two colors that are still wet, how easy is it to separate them?
Depends on how warm and sticky the clay is, and that's kind of individual. Sometimes you can, you know, like, sometimes you could just separate it. Like, I might be able to take a petal out of here. You know, the purple, the magenta stuck, but the black didn't stick to the black. You can back up, yeah.
What about making things that are hollow on the inside? How easy?
There's ways to do that. The clay is got a strength to it. It's a cookie cutter. You do things like this, where it would take a cutter, get it to stick, and then I'm going to shape this. Well, this is a mica clay, so it's a little drier. Let me take, we're done with this, so bye, flower. All right, so now I'm going to kind of pet this into a shape, and then I can take that piece and basically this is now a hollow form. There's air in it. So that's one way. Another way is those cornstarch packing peanuts. If you're building something that is going to have openings in it so that you could get water in it, you can like build it around those cornstarch packing peanuts and then like just wash those out. I've built forms around toilet paper because then you can just wash it out. But yeah, you can make hollow forms. I think that's all I got. I hope it inspired you, and I think it's a great medium for a lot of different things. Yes?
Where do you buy it?
What's that?
Where do you buy it?
Where do my pull it up? Michael's, Hobby Lobby, AC Moore, Dick Blick, they all have clay. I don't know about pricing. Monroe online, Monroe Crafts, has very good Polymer Clay Express online. There's lots of sources for the polymer clay. I don't know what's most, easy to find in New York. Yeah, I made buttons or jackets. She bought a jacket that she liked, but she didn't like the buttons. So I made her new buttons. And they can go through the wash. But as I said, this is Primo. If you buy Sculpey 3, which is the same company, Polyform, it is their cheaper kind of educational line. It's very brittle. You couldn't put them through the wash, and something like this would snap. It wouldn't just flex. So different clays have different qualities.
What was your favorite brand you said?
Primo. It's on the paper.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Do you have a little kiln? How do you bake it?
I have a countertop convection oven that I use, and it's dedicated to crafts. But for a long time I used my home oven. The clay is non-toxic. Burning it is, not pleasant. It kind of stinks, and you don't want to ruin anything you've made. So you really need to use an oven thermometer because most ovens are not calibrated properly. So toaster ovens are really bad. They fluctuate, they spike up and down, they tend to burn things. But you can use your home oven until you find that this is something you are going to do enough of to dedicate a countertop oven to. But
Do you need to put anything like a ceramic tile in there to stabilize the temperature?
I'm one of the only ones who do that. You recommended it. We have a couple of marble bases, like from trophies. We put them in the bottom of the oven, and it works like a pizza stone. So once that gets up to temperature, kind of keeps the oven hot, so the oven's not constantly turning on and off to regulate itself. And the oven I have is convection, so it's kind of circulating the air. So lighter stuff, if it's not stuck to the tile, will float around. So you've got to stick it down.
What do you use as a base to?
I bake on ceramic tiles, yeah. But because you're only baking at 275, I mean, you can bake on index cards. You can put anything in there because it's such a low temperature. It's, you know, I have metal bowls, glass bowls, you know, wood things that I've used as, you know, bamboo skewers for the inside of beads, like all of those leaf beads were baked on bamboo skewers. So, you know, there's many things you can do because the components can go into the oven at that temperature.
And does metal adhere pretty well, like here the?
Yeah, because I
fastener?
sandwiched it in, yeah. You know, you can use, like, to repair the clay, you can rebake it with using the liquid clay. If you need to, super glue works well on this, and E6000 works well, but either one of those, if you put them back in the oven, they fail. So the E6000 and the super glue are only good when it's, like, definitely not going back in the oven.
Once it's been in the oven, you could put it in water or take a bath with it, and it would be totally fine. Right?
Yeah, yeah. And these, I stamped these with a rubber stamp, and then after they were baked, I painted them and wiped it off. So this is acrylic paint. You can use oil paints in the clay, though. So if you take some of that translucent clay, you can mix small amounts of oil paints into it with the pasta machine, and that makes really nice effects. So.
Is it the actual, like, heating that cures and hardens the clay, or is it the cooling after it's heated?
It is more flexible when it first comes out of the oven, but I mean, the oven is what's curing it.
Okay.
But when it first comes out, yeah, it's very flexible and soft, and it's more delicate. So you can break it more easily till it cools down.
We built the water canary.
Oh, yeah, that's why I brought this.
We made the test tool out of polymer clay to keep it stable. So the light source.
Right, so with the clay, I
in
just,
the right spot all the time.
I built a little box for this to fit into.
Just wrapped it around and made a base and put it in the oven. So it's not.
Yeah.
It's really precise.
You can make it as precise as you
don't have to use it
need.
for decorative things. You could use it as a component to make your project, or as a packaging.
When this goes into the water canary, it needs to be dark, right, so the sensor can read it. So it goes into a holder that's built out of the clay. So that's the water, it's, right, she said, what's the water canary?
But the water canary is something that we built here, that you take a sample of water and you put it in a test tube, you drop the test tube into a hole that has a photocell and a bunch of LEDs in it. And it measures the amount of contaminants in the water. And it works on the basis that if there are live organisms in the water, they absorb ultraviolet. So we measure the difference between infrared and ultraviolet. And we use an Arduino to calculate whether or not we've reached the threshold. We work with the NYU bio department to figure out what the thresholds were. We used actual bacteria to do that test. And one of the students won an award. Some of the students here won an award at the NYU entrepreneurial competition. And they're trying to make it into a business that allows you to take a sample of water during a crisis, put it in this device. It tells you with a red light or a green light whether it's okay to drink the water or don't drink the water, and then it broadcasts that result over the cellular network to Google's network, where Google puts it up on a map and shows you immediately in real time where the good water is and where the bad water is. We're now involved in a project where we're doing the same thing with secondhand smoke.
Oh, really?
We're starting our project. No.
So I forgot to show you this piece. This is faux wood. And this is all made using clays with mica. So by conditioning the clay and lining up the mica, then I roll it up, and I'm going to twist it, which is disturbing the mica. But it's disturbing it in the same direction each time, so it's making the stripes, which will be the wood grain. Push this back. I'm going to flatten it so it can go back in the pasta machine. And now when it comes out, you have what can be wood grain. And just by adding different colors, I was able to make a whole palette of different stained woods.
And they just stuck together before they're baked.
Yeah. All right. And one last thing. Yeah, you can imitate pretty much any stones, any gemstones, any stones. There's techniques online for turquoise, for opals, for quartz. A lot of cool things. Anyway,
It gets scratched, right?
what's that?
Does it get scratched like
It can, but I've worn it a lot of times. It doesn't really tend to. All right, so these are just, the scraps that I've twisted together. And I've twisted it, and now I just compacted it into, a little pod. And I'm going to cut this in half. And the design, when I open it, is going to be symmetrical. So, as simple as that, you can have some pretty fancy artwork that, you can either shape this and bake this whole thing as a bead, or you can carefully cut off the surface and apply it to a background sheet. But, where'd the other one go? This is essentially what this is. So I think that's all I got. And you can come up and take a look at any of this. My card is here if you want to see my work online. And everybody got a handout? All right, good. Well, thank you for coming.
No, thank you.